Right. Good morning again. That doggone Gavin Jackson. In my mind, he's like Steve Harvey. That rascal knows how to bring you out, boy. He talking. I'm like, yeah, I want to meet him. Dude, that dude is all right. Yes, I'm going to party with that dude. That dude is all right. How y'all doing this morning? You good? You warm? It's been a mild winter, but I gotta admit, Earl, I'm ready. I'm ready for spring already. Come on, bring it on. Bring it on, Jesus. My God. Every now and again, we sing this song, and some of the lyrics go like, Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you. Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you. Jesus in me loves the Jesus in you. You're easy to love. And one of the questions that has been present for me as I've researched for this series is, can you still be easy to love if you establish boundaries that inform and instruct others how to navigate within a framework that works for you? Can you still be easy to love if you say, this is the line, and to cross that line is to cross my boundary? Can you still be easy to love if you pick up the mat that says welcome and refuse to allow someone who does not understand the value of being in relationship with you, if you pick up the mat and not allow yourself to be walked on? Is it still easy to be loved? I believe that once we know what to expect, we can decide then how to manage within the framework of those relationships. Does that make sense? And so I can still be easy to love and have my boundaries. As a matter of fact, my boundaries don't make me more difficult to love. They make me easier to love. Because if you can respect where I'm coming from, then I can respect your space in my life. Are you with me? And so then boundaries are not something that make us harder to deal with. They are something that make us easier to deal with. We said that a boundary is a line of demarcation that marks the limits of a particular area. We've also said that the strength of those boundaries are directly tied to the consequences that we attach to the other end of the boundary. If you can encroach beyond the boundary and nothing happens as a result of your encroachment, then it's like the same thing as having no boundary. Right? If you have a sign that says, beware of dog, and I walk in your yard, if there is no dog, I'm bound to walk through your yard again. Does that make sense? And poorly defined boundaries are almost as if we don't have boundaries. And so the boundaries help us distinguish what is our responsibility. Point to yourself and say, my responsibility. Boundaries help us distinguish for ourselves and others what is my responsibility to take care of so that I will take care of it. When I say it's my responsibility, it simply means that I have the ability to respond. And so then establishing and maintaining boundaries requires us to be highly intentional and honest with ourselves. See, it's difficult to honor yourself if you won't be honest with yourself. It's difficult to have others honor your boundaries if I won't honor the boundary myself. And so even when dealing with super spiritual people, it's important to have boundaries, because even the super spiritual will violate your boundary. So our topic today is around boundaries and our families. Now, when it comes to boundaries and our families, I believe it requires us to have two types of boundaries. I believe because of the nature and interaction of our engagement with our families, it's important to have a general boundary, but it's also important to have more nuanced boundaries. Let me tell you what I mean. For instance, if you need to borrow my car, you can't just borrow my car without my permission. That's a nuanced boundary. Another nuanced boundary is if you borrow my car, you can't bring it back with no gas in it. Right? That's a nuanced boundary. Another nuanced boundary might be if you bring the car filled with gas back before a certain hour or after a certain hour, you might not be able to get on the other side of the door. That's a nuanced boundary. But then there are just more general boundaries that we want to have as we are dealing with our family members. When it comes to establishing boundaries with our family, I think it's important that we be self-aware and self-reflective. Here is what I mean when I say it's important to be self-aware. Self-awareness comes from the ability to understand where I am within the given moment in relation to a particular piece of stimuli. Here is what I mean. AJ gives me a compliment. What's my interaction with that compliment? Do I accept it? Do I reject it? Do I think I'm not worthy of it? See, because while we quickly say thank you, some of us deflect it. Right? Some of us, when someone says nice to us, we don't have the wherewithal in that moment to just accept the compliment. Some of us in that moment, if we're not self-aware, we'll miss it. Some of us in the moment have to deflect the attention away from the very thing we want. So you don't spend this much time looking this good, hoping that someone won't recognize. When you look this good, Ron, you want somebody to see it. And so what happens when they see it? Are you able to accept self-awareness, what you wanted? Also, self-reflective when you begin to think back on, why did I respond that way? What motivated me that way? Are you with me? So why did I reject the compliment? Is it that I don't feel like I deserve it? Are you with me? So then when it comes to interacting with family and being both self-aware and self-reflective, it gives us the opportunity to establish healthy boundaries and still have healthy engagement with our family. So the example that I want to look at today is the example of Joseph. Joseph is the son of Israel. And Joseph has a number of brothers. But as it turns out for Joseph, Joseph finds favor with his father. Now, Joseph is a little bit of a different kind of cat. All of us have a little bit of Joseph in us. Joseph is that urge in you to want to expand and have more and do more and be more. It's the impulse and the impetus in you that lets you know that where you are right now is not the limit of what's capable for you. Are you with me? And so because Joseph begins to see who he is, Joseph begins to front like who he's going to be. For instance, Scripture says that Joseph is the favorite among his father. And so his father gives him this coat. And Joseph can't wait to wear this coat. Not only can Joseph not wait to wear the coat, he wears it to the place where the people who didn't get the coat will see it first. So Joseph goes and he wears this coat of many colors around his brothers. Somebody say strike one. Next, Joseph has this dream. And in the dream, Joseph is seeing that his crops will outstrip the crops of his brothers. And so Joseph goes and he says to his brothers, I had this dream. Now let me share something with you. Not everybody is going to be excited about the vision that you have for your life. See, sometimes when God is showing you what's possible for you, it's not for you to share, it's for you to incubate with. Because everybody is not pulling for your success. Everybody, even people sometimes in the very core of your family, not everybody is wanting to see you do better, have better, or be better. Are you with me? And so Joseph shares this story about what he sees. Somebody say strike two. Well, when increases in your consciousness, you can't help but experience that which you have the consciousness for. And so Joseph has another dream, and Joseph can't wait to tell his family about this other dream. So Joseph goes and he talks to his brothers and his father, and this time everybody is upset with him. Somebody say strike three. Now what happens as a result of this dream is that Joseph winds up finding himself on the outside of his relationships with his family. See, sometimes in order to stand in your greatness, you have to be willing to stand alone. Sometimes in order to be what God is pulling you to be, you got to be willing to separate from the crowd. And sometimes you don't get a choice. The crowd just separates from you. So we've got Joseph out here having this experience, being dispatched and disregarded. And the challenge for Joseph is not that he is favored. The challenge is not that he is a dreamer. The challenge is not what he is to become. The challenge for Joseph is that his family can only see him within a context and through a lens that is comfortable to them. And so because people can only see you through a lens that makes them comfortable, because they can only see you through the lens that helps them feel safe, because they can only see you through a lens that does not challenge or move them, either they have to reconcile that or they have to do something with you. Are you with me? And so when it comes to not being able to help people see, they don't have to see you, but they do have to respect you. And so the first boundary that I want to talk about as it relates to our family is the boundary called respect. Respect is the feeling of deep admiration for someone or something prompted by their abilities, their qualities, and their achievement. When we have a boundary for respect, we can give ourselves emotional permission to stand out and be a separate person. When we have a boundary of respect for ourselves and for what we're seeing, we can make free choices about our life, and we don't have to feel guilty about it. People who own the boundary of respect do not feel guilty when they make choices that are consistent with what they want to experience in their lives. Many of you sitting in this room right now made a choice to be a part of this, even though some people warned you against that place. They told you, those people are a little different. What they teach is a little different. That woman out there is a little different. They warned you about coming into it, but then they started seeing you get better. They started seeing you walk and talk taller. They started borrowing money from you. They started to see that some of the challenges that you had before you didn't have now. And they don't have to come with you, but they do have to respect your decision to be in the place that allows you to be what God called you to be. Are you with me? The pioneer Jackie Robinson famously said, "I'm not concerned with you liking or disliking me, but I do demand that you respect me as a human being." A couple of weeks ago, I told you that part of defining your boundaries requires that you decide for yourself how you want the world to experience your brilliance. You've got to decide for yourself, what part of your greatness do you want to show to the world? I love this poem. It says, "Many a flower has bloomed unceasingly and wasted sweetness upon the cold desert air." It means that so many of us have greatness in us, and yet we never have the courage enough and the respect for what God put us to let it out so that others can see it, whether they like it or not. See, you don't have to like it in order to respect it. There's a difference between me being your friend and me being your daddy. I'm happy to be my children's friend. Second, but I insist on being your father first. And so what that means is you don't have to like it, but you do have to respect it. Joseph decided that he would let his brilliance spring forth by not being ashamed to demonstrate what he had been given. See, some of us, when we get the coat, we just hang it in the closet and wait for the right occasion to wear it. I'm gonna wear this. I'm gonna wear this on my 50th birthday, or I'm gonna wear this to graduation, or I'm gonna wear this once I get the right opportunity. And what I want you to know, if we follow the example of Joseph, is that the perfect time to wear what God has given you, the perfect time to share the greatness that God wants to express through you, the perfect time and the appointed time is now. Don't wait for a special time to show that you're a special person. Instead, just go ahead and let it out right now, because there is something special about you that the world is waiting to see. But if you won't show it, we'll never see it. And so I can appreciate that Joseph is not concerned about who is concerned about how Joseph shows up. His commitment is to let the greatness and the brilliance of God shine through him. How many of you are saying yes to making a commitment to let the greatness and the brilliance of God shine through you, and to do it unashamedly? That's not a lot of you. That's just a few of you. Let me say it to you this way. No, let me say it to you this way. Let me say it to you this way. What would happen if, when you came to church, you let the greatness out? What would happen if when you went to the office tomorrow, you let the greatness out? What would happen if the world had an opportunity to see who you really were? And so Joseph had a boundary called respect for what he had in him. He had a boundary called respect for what he had in him, and he made a decision to share that with the world. Joseph realized that he was born an original, and he wouldn't settle for living as a copy. Yeah, if that just resonated with you, I want to challenge you, I want to encourage you to recognize that you were born an original and not settle for living as a copy. Yeah, I want to give you that gift on this morning. Because if you won't respect it, who will? If you won't respect your brilliance, who will? See, if it doesn't mean enough to you to wear it, who's going to encourage you to put it on? If you won't grab it out of the place or the drawer that you stuffed it down in, who's going to encourage you to get it out? What I love about this place is it reminds you of the greatness that has been placed in you, but you can forget that you are great. And when you forget that you're great, you suffer. The second boundary I want to encourage you to use as we look at this Joseph model is the boundary called control. The boundary called control. How many of you know that we don't always get to determine what happens to us within the context of our family relationships? Joseph learned the hard way that he was not able to control how his family responded to what he saw. See, you can't control what people do, but you can control how you react. Are you with me? So Joseph was really fortunate and he was really favored. He had the benefit of having the people, his brothers, who had a problem with him. He had the benefit of his brothers dumping him in the beginning. Most of us won't be so fortunate as to have the people who don't really like you dump you. Most of us will have to make the decision to dump them. Sometimes you either have to let go or you have to get dragged. And Joseph had the benefit of having folks who couldn't see what he saw let him go. You can't control whether or not they bring negativity to you. You can't control whether or not they see the value in you. You can't control or change or transform how it is they intend to engage with you. What you can control is what you do about it. So, but what if, Rev, what if I can't let them go? What if there is a lot of negativity, but they're not going to dump me and I'm not ready to dump them? What do I do then? Well, once you know what to expect, you can manage accordingly, right? Once I know that my interactions with you will be negative, even if I don't dump you, I know how to manage around you. Unless you're sitting next to him. Just keep looking right this way if you sit next to him. What am I saying when I say manage around them? I'm saying we have to know how to not give all of our attention to the negativity, right? We say where our attention goes, our power flows. So I can make the conscious decision to be in control of my attention and not give my attention to the negativity. I remember when one of my children were going through adolescence, and I was waiting for the wonderful child who went in to hurry up and process through. And they were taking their time about getting through adolescence. And before I knew it, I was outside of myself, doing things that adolescents do. And then I had to come to myself and say, wait a minute. You already been through adolescence. You're supposed to be the adult. Why are you going through what they're going through? You don't have to go through adolescence if you already adult. So you can let them go through and love them through it without going through it with them. Are you with me? All right. That part I can control. I can't control how you go through it. But if I have the boundary of control, I can control how I go through it. So one of the things that we want to do as we work this boundary called control is we want to be able to distinguish ourselves from the roles that we feel. Are you with me? We want to be able to distinguish ourselves from the roles that we feel. See, it's really easy to confuse yourself with the roles in life that you feel. It's easy to assume that because you are a father or because you are a son or because you are a mate or because you are a teacher or because you are a minister or because you are a doctor, that is who you are. See, none of the roles that we feel have the capacity to consume who we are. Are you with me? So then it is important as a boundary of control personally to recognize that I am not my role. Why is that important? Because when Joseph's brothers fall out with him, they don't really have a problem with Joseph. They have a problem with the fact that their expectations of their younger brother are not being met. See, sometimes we're taking things personally and it really doesn't have anything to do with you. It's got everything to do with the other person and the role that they expect you to play in their life. So when you start to move outside of that role, it creates disruption. When you start to grow, it makes disruption. When you start to think differently, it creates disruption. When you start to establish what will and won't work, it creates disruption. Because the expectation is that you will always be who I've always known you to be. But the more you give yourself over to who it is you are to become, the more space you put in between their expectation and your manifestation. So they didn't really have a problem with Joseph per se. They had a problem with the fact that this young boy is getting outside of himself. And so what should Joseph do? He shouldn't stop. He should be who God called him to be. Because watch this. On the other side of it is the help for the whole family. See, if you will just come into the true awareness of yourself, if you will refuse to play or stay small so that other people around you can be comfortable, if you will continue to say yes to what is pulling you forward, what you will find is that it has the potential, it has the capacity, it has the ability to help the people you are connected to. So be willing to be the example of how they can come out of it, even if they don't come with you. Are you with me? And so Joseph has to come to learn that the stuff his brothers are tripping about is not really about him. It's just about the role that he plays in their life. And so the third boundary I want to give you is the boundary of forgiveness. Amy said, you teach about forgiveness a lot, Rev. I said, yeah, in part because we know that demonstration comes with the way we think and the way we feel being aligned. Is that right? And if my thinking is pulling me forward, but I'm emotionally stuck at a point of pain, then there can be a blessing for me that I can't experience, not because it's not ready for me, but because I won't forgive. There can be a breakthrough that is available for me, and I'm thinking toward the breakthrough, but emotionally I'm stuck. And it's not until I free up my emotional body and allow the power of my feeling nature to get in alignment with the seed, because it is the feeling nature that gives birth to the blessing. It is not simply what you think that gives birth to the blessing. It's also what you feel that gives birth to the blessing. And if your feelings are tied up in stuff that you haven't worked through, the bag of stuff, it's just stuff, y'all. It's just stuff. It's just stuff. Listen, people did the best they could from where they are when they were there. And you're no longer there. But being unwilling to forgive brings you back to that place every time. Are you with me? And so the third boundary that we need to have is the boundary called forgiveness. So what Joseph learned is that there are these family members in the chain of his relationships. And what those family members did was they set off a string of events. Oh my goodness. By his being willing to show up authentically great, and by their inability to see him as he would be, he went from being a part of the family to a person in the ditch. Then he went from being a person in the ditch to being in Potiphar's house. And then he went from being in Potiphar's house to being accused of something he never did. Then he went from being accused of something he never did to being thrown into jail. But then he went from being thrown into jail to helping somebody interpret their dream. See, if you can see the line, and if you can understand this scripture, and if you can bring yourself into the alignment of the nature of God and just recognize that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose, even something that was meant for your harm can work out for your good. But you've got to be able to bring yourself into alignment with the nature of God and not with the nature of what you went through. Oh, I'm excited about that right there. I've got to be able to bring myself into alignment with the nature of God, good, and not the nature of what I went through. Because what I went through, if I understand it, is the training ground for who I am to become. Just because you saw it over here doesn't mean you're ready for it over here. There is a process that you must go through. There is no such thing as undemonstrated understanding. It's not until you become what you see that you can experience it over here. Are you with me? And so the classes are important. The sermon is important. The teaching at the temple is important. Listening to it, it's all important. But it doesn't mean you get to bypass the process. Those are all tools that give you the ability to effectively navigate the process. Because we all have our going through to go through. And you don't get on the other side of the demonstration until you learn how to forgive the stuff that you've been through. And so Joseph sees his brothers. Come on, let's give it to me. He sees his brothers. And he is the HMIC. I said M. It's Black History Month. He is the head man in charge. And so his brothers come to him. Watch this. And when they see him, they don't recognize him. They could never see him when he first told them who he was. Why would they be able to see him when they couldn't see it over there? See, don't miss it. You have to be able to see it in order to experience it. And if you can't see it, you can't experience it. So when you get it in the seed form over here, start to work with that seed form over here, because if you can't see it in your thinking and in your feeling, it'll never show up in your demonstration. And so they can't see him. He has to let them know, like, it's me, y'all. It's Joseph. They like Joseph who? Right? It's funny how when you the HMIC, they really want to forget about what they did. But that ain't your problem. That's not even your work. He could see them through the lens of the process, not through the lens of the problems. So he was able to welcome them, because you know who grew through the process? Joseph did. Right? The people who have been sent as a part of your familial support system, the people who give what they can from where they are, they do the best they can. But the boundary called forgiveness is the boundary that you and I must have as a part of the work that we are committed to as spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual laws. Your spirit is not hurt by the stuff you went through. Your feelings might be hurt, but your spirit ain't. And so you got to be able to do the work on the other side. You got to be committed to working through the process. And because he made a commitment to work through the process, he sees the people who have done him the most dirt. Not only does he see them, he helps them. Don't raise your hands. How many of you in this very moment are still carrying the weight of a grudge? Don't answer. The name comes up on the phone, and the weight of it is too heavy to even answer the phone. I submit to you that carrying that weight might be consuming your attention to manifest your greatness. And so they come to him, and he helps them. There's a lesson there. And then their father dies. And because these brothers were never able to see, they assume that now is the time for payback. They couldn't see you then, so they might not be able to see you now. And so they are expecting you to respond from the same level of awareness that dropped you by the side of the road, that didn't keep its commitment, that stole from you. They're expecting the same thing. And then Joseph says, you meant it. for evil. You meant it to harm me. You meant to hurt my feelings. You were trying to break me. You meant it for evil. But God, y'all, meant it for good. And so there is something within the lineage of your relationships that is calling on you in this moment to heal it, to be an agent for the healing presence and power of God right now, mighty in our midst. There is an opportunity for you to heal it. And maybe you didn't have anything to do with it. Maybe you were just around when it happened. Maybe you just heard about it. Or maybe you were the culprit. There is an opportunity to forgive it. There is an opportunity to heal it. Because there is no time or space in God. There is a Joseph in you that wants to uplift and expand and increase the wrong so that it can become used for good. Are you with me?